Hey, what up, everyone? Um, I really wasn't going to plan on going live at all today. I was going to upload a couple of things, but this diddy stuff here is something I want to bring attention to, and I want to say shout out to Pam, the law intellect, for this right here. With that being said, let's get into it. And I will be sure to add Pam's link in the title. I may not do all of Pam's live stream because I got somewhere I gotta be, but I at least want to try to get much as possible of this live stream out.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. This is your husband. I was known as your intellect. I was thinking that I could come on early this morning because I have like a 9 o'clock. All right. So while I'm here, I said, well, let's just go over this new information that dropped on paper related to the Sean Diddy phone star. Because the more I scroll, the more I see this is what they are talking about. As an initial matter, the government did not drop any charges. Charges are five counts that represent conspiracy. Count one. You have ex trafficking. Count two. Cash. You have count
Pam,
three, which is also related to cash, which is the Constitution of the Man Act. You got count four and five are the same as cash, trafficking, and
I wasn't even
and
planning on going live today.
that's James.
But
That's James.
this little thing with
And
Diddy,
so
I just felt I had no choice really.
they have not dropped charges. Those are your charges, all right?
And I want to say this too, Omanai, since you're here. I believe by 3 o'clock this Friday, the whole Diddy case will be done. And that's my belief. But will it be done by 3 o'clock Friday is a question.
It's starts with that.
And again, this is Pam, the
I'll
law
be here
intellect.
before I start to come out.
Uh,
One go, I'm not
in
lying.
case you wanted to know
It's
who
the
this
sun.
was.
You need it on my back. I got this little fan on, so if it starts bothering me, just let me know. I'll cut it off. I'll endure it. You know, I'm trying to keep it
Let
on.
me turn this up a
So
little bit
what has
more.
happened is, and this is one thing that I told you, so you're intellect, you already know. If you follow me, you should know.
Make sure this
In
is
the
loud and
beginning,
clear.
when in opening statements, the government is going to say, you're going to hear testimony about dot, 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 dot. Okay? They're going to tell you all of that. What I told you all is what's going to happen is the defense is going to be over there keeping copious notes to make sure that the government proves every single thing that they said that they're going to prove. This is what they told you all. This is what they vowed to the jury they're going to prove. So they're going to get up and they're going to say they did not prove A, B, C, D, E, G, whatever. And so what happened is, as this trial progressed, in my opinion, I think the government realized there would be certain things that could not, that was not proved. Okay, was not proven. However, if you look at the indictment, there was a whole lot of predicate acts, a whole lot that they are alleging in this case. Like that, probably not. But let me see, hold on. And in my opinion, I don't think the government knew what they're saying. They're trying to quote streamline, and we can pull it up.
Again, this
Streamline the
live here is not going
process
to be
and
that long.
make it
Probably give y'all
easier. They're
at
not making
least
it that
half
long.
hour to 45 minutes.
But That's what they basically were saying. But in my opinion, I feel like they just knew after they went through it. And the defense is going to pounce all over it. And they're still going to pounce all over it. I think if the
As they
judge,
should.
agrees to amend however they're trying to amend it. But let me pull up the indictment real quick so you guys can be refreshed on what the actual predicate acts are. Yes, make sure you hit the like button for your girl. So if you go down to the racketeering conspiracy, always go back to your authority. If you go to the racketeering conspiracy, they say specifically from at least in or around 2004 through 2024, the defendant and others known and unknown being persons employed by and associated with the Combs enterprise described in paragraph 6 through 12 of this indictment and enterprise engaged in and the activities of which affected interstate and foreign commerce knowingly combined, conspired, confederated, and agreed together. So, racketeering conspiracy, that's why I said the word conspiracy is actually important in this case. You do have just a straight RICO charge. And what happened yesterday when the defense was arguing their Rule 29 of their motion for acquittal, one of the things they pointed out was Christina Corms, you're saying she's the co-conspirator. She didn't get involved until 2016. So we started out in 2004, which we know, I told you all, the only person we really saw that was around in 2004 is Capricorn Clark. What is Capricorn Clark connected to? She is connected to the actual, all of the issues related to kid case. The kidnapping, the arson, all of that. She got, yeah. So when you look at,
And I'm gonna say this too. I know I said this once. I said this again. On the Malibu cocktail that was thrown in Kid Cudi's car, they said it was female DNA on it. Now, if I remember correctly, the female DNA was not tested. How many of y'all want to bet the female DNA on that Marvel cocktail belongs to Capricorn Clark? I'll wait.
the racketeering activity as the term defined in Title 18 United States Code Section 1961 sub 1 and sub 5, A, they say multiple acts involving kidnapping chargeable under the following provisions of law. They got kidnapped. Okay, so they still have kidnapping under the law. They didn't say they were taking that out, but then they say attempted kidnapping. So that's the part it sounds like they're trying to take out according to the left. So letter. Aiding and abetting. Conspiracy. And they got another kidnapping. So all of this stuff is what they're saying. So them taking out the attempted if the jury hypothetically felt like they were two predicates, they only need two predicate acts. But what I think the government is trying to do is they're trying to make sure, because sometimes people have the thought process of, you didn't prove what you said was going to be proven in this case as it pertains to one, and we're going to assign that to others, but you probably ain't really doing what you're supposed to do on the other one. They're trying to be as clear and concise as possible, so there's no look of, we didn't prove that specific argument beyond a reasonable doubt. But apparently they still feel like they kidnapping, because I think they just were requesting to throw out attempted kidnapping. So they still have the kidnapping. They got conspiracy, they got kidnapping, and they have another agent in the back. So they have to prove all of that. So they're saying these predicate acts, they know they have not necessarily proven that, and it may just confuse the jury because you have to show it in a conspiracy, an agreement. So can you show that there was some type of conspiracy when it came to these specific predicate acts? Multiple acts involving arson chargeable under the following provisions. Even though we only heard of one act of arson, specific with the word arson, We only heard one, and that's the Kid Cudi. And it has California Penal Code Section 451, which is arson. Then they have the Penal Code 21A, which is attempted. That's the part that they're trying to take out. Then they have aiding and abetting conspiracy. Multiple acts involving bribery, chargeable under the following provisions. And then they have bribery of a witness. They didn't say anything about that I recall. They didn't say anything about informant. They didn't say anything about forced labor, uh, trafficking. Then they have related to transportation and inducement to travel for purposes of prostitution. And then they also have multiple offenses involving possession with intent to distribute or distribution of narcotics and controlled substances. So that is all that really happening. So anybody basically saying, oh, they dropped it, that's not true. The predicate acts, they have, as you see, multiple predicate acts they're alleging. And I think they're trying to get rid of the ones of which they have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Even though they'll say, well, because you also have to prove the predicate act beyond a reasonable doubt. I believe it has to be met on what the predicate act is.
So basically, what you're saying, Pam, is they're changing the paperwork to the to get them on the stuff they can prove. Is that what you're trying to tell me right now?
Acts are under RICO. So, so that's the reason why. Now, if the defense, and I was just talking to another lawyer this morning when we were talking about it. I said what I told you all when we were discussing. I'm like, they're trying to eliminate, in my opinion, the defense of you didn't prove this, so you probably didn't prove that. So they're trying not to muddy the
pretty
water
much.
too much because let's be clear, the government
That
already
everybody's a
knows they watching
69 guy, freak ass
they're
nigga,
watching social
69
media.
guy,
They're
freak ass
watching. They
nigga,
can say
is
they just
69
watching to
guy.
make sure we don't
Okay,
say
my
anything
bad.
over but they're watching. And they see something
A whole bunch of
confusing
freaks
other people,
and a whole bunch
and
of
they're like,
69
well,
guys.
they're the public, they are the jury of our peers, then we're going to try to unconfuse them, and we're going to try to simplify it as much as we can so people ain't confused.
The only thing they got him on is the prostitution. And he can put that down to like 5 years.
Well, yeah, because what will I'm telling you, I told you all in the beginning.
Alright, I got pauses for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, the RICO they got is really on the prostitution. And even on that, from where I'm sitting, the RICO on that is a weak one. They really can't get on trafficking because the, sex workers chose to come out. So it really isn't trafficking, I don't think, if it's by choice, right? Or am I wrong? Okay, whatever. I'm gonna let this play before I have to go.
I said, as defense attorneys, what you literally do.
Oh Lord, let me put my glasses on so I can read this.
They told you they were gonna prove that. Did you see it? Because I ain't see it. You know why? Because they didn't have the information to prove what they said they were. They're just trying to
Bingo. They
make
didn't
money
have
on it.
proof.
They're being the moral police. They're being the bedroom police. And they're
Talk
just
about
trying to make
Pam.
my client look bad so you, for whatever, come up with their reasons as to why.
And I'm gonna say this while I'm thinking about it. Whatever y'all do in y'all's bedroom ain't none of my MFing business. Just saying. If y'all want to be on some diddy mess, be on some diddy mess and keep it to yourself.
So that is something that is prevalent that most defense attorneys do. We hold you to everything that you say that you're going to prove in this case. So
As y'all should.
actual letter that was filed, and And the government, just like we went over the proposed jury instructions from the defense, the government is also now, they're trying to add lines to, they're trying to add lines to the jury instructions as it pertains to different charges.
Wait a minute, add line to
The
the jury instructions.
conspiracy,
Hold on.
what I'm,
Now wait a minute. Now, if some of y'all been following what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks, I've also been doing the Karen Reed case. And if you remember the Karen Reed case, Judge Beverly Cantone actually, herself, actually did try to add stuff to the paperwork for the jury instructions in the Karen Reed case. And the reason I'm stopping is if they want to add stuff to the case, they're supposed to add that before the closing arguments. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a fat country boy. Let's get back into it.
and yesterday, they are concerned about the confusion that may come with agreement and conspiracy. So they're going through case law, which I told you sometimes you can try to add stuff to the pattern jury instructions, and you use case law as your authority. What we call them special jury instructions. You add case law to your authority. So if that's the case, and you're adding case law, that's what they're trying to do in this letter, to show case law where they can add certain lines to help them.
But if y'all going to add stuff to the paperwork, the court has to explain to the jury members on why they add it to the paperwork and what they're supposed to, and which part of the paperwork that they're supposed to be looking at as well.
Let's be clear. I think they know. Some people say it's a slam dunk. I said I don't agree with that. And I think they know that there may be some confusion. And to me, they
It's not slam dunk on everything, but in my opinion, the only thing they got him on is the prostitution. And again, he can probably get that pled down to 5 years. To 5 years, um, and surely he'll be out. But I don't believe he's gonna get out scot free. Diddy probably is gonna do 2 or 3 years in jail. Just saying, and probably do the rest on house arrest. Just saying.
confirmed that in their letter that they wrote. So they got together to figure out how to basically help ourselves in this case. It helps the jurors to understand the law. Now they're concerned about the jurors not being able to understand how to actually apply the facts to the law. And they pretty much said it in here. So we're going to read it. I don't want you to take my word for it. It's only 8 pages. You got time. I got time. Let's get it in. So the letter, which is real, some people said they thought it was fake. No, this is real. The government writes, they understand the court's desire for streamlined instruction. So they're saying they just doing this like we're trying to streamline and see what we can eliminate. With that in mind, the government has suggested ways to streamline those instructions. Specifically, the government has removed instructions from the charge relating to one, attempted kidnapping under both California and New York, two, attempted arson under California law, and three, aiding and abetting extraction. The government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, so instructions are no longer necessary. So they're not going to proceed on it. The government has also attempted to simplify the language related to count one, which is the racketeering, conspiracy, a proposal as explained in the government's comment bubble that the government hopes not only serves the purposes of streamlining the instructions, but also will avoid any confusion as to the operative agreement for count one. So, this is the first point that they're trying to get in with the ex-trafficking and forced labor instructions. While the government has taken seriously the court's desire for brevity, the government still strongly believes certain limited additional instructions on ex-trafficking and forced labor instructions, which are regularly given in ex-trafficking and forced labor trials in this circuit, are necessary for the jury to adequately understand the law on these charges. So they basically went through to try to find authority for them to say, well, it don't have to necessarily be this. Just because you don't see this doesn't mean it's not ex-trafficking. Yeah, you might see some consent, but just because they consented a few times, things that came out in the trial that they cannot argue with that came out, they're finding case law to say it don't necessarily have to be this, and we feel like the jury should be able to consider that. So, each of these instructions reflect established case law and are directly relevant to key issues in this case. The government has serious concerns that the jury may misunderstand the applicable law for both charges, which are extremely complex legal concepts of which jurors may have preconceived mistaken notions. And that's what I told you. I'm like, why is everybody saying this stuff is so easy? It's not. It's complicated. Now you get the government saying they know that it's a complex quote. It's a complex legal concept. And so they don't want it because it's complex. The government is like, wait a minute, I'm seeing what these people out here talking about. What if the jury is thinking that? That ain't proved nothing. What if the jury is thinking that? So now we're going back to the drawing board trying to make sure we find authority that it's not what everyone may think has to be proven, but they only need to prove this. Okay. The government has listed the precedent for each of the instructions in its comments to the forced labor and ex-trafficking sections of the request to charge. To avoid repeating that long precedent, here the government limits the below largely providing the government's reasons why, based on the particular facts and issues in this trial, these additional instructions are necessary. So as to ex-trafficking, remember earlier consent not determinative. When you talk about Cassie, even James, most of them said they consented. There's text messages that were entered of which now they don't want the jury to say.
And I want to say this loud and clear. Jane, as we know, really is Daphne Joy, was not a victim. And here's what pisses me off with the whole thing of Daphne Joy trying to be a Jane Doe. The the people there at the trial, everybody there knew who he was. So why you gonna sit there and waste everybody's time? All you had to do was come out and let it be known. Or is this about you not getting that child support check from 50 Cent? Which one is it? And Cassie was no victim either. She was a willing participant. Now, I'm not saying that her getting beat on is okay. I'm not saying that. I don't agree with that. I do not condone that. I do not condone violence in any way, shape, or form. However, if you look at the text messages and look at the pattern with Cassie, now some of y'all may say, did Cassie leave? Yes, she did leave 3 times. Now the 2 times she did eventually come back. The third time she went with her now husband, but at the beginning when she was with her husband, she was still getting in bed with Diddy. It don't sound like a victim to me. Again, I'm just saying.
They agreed to all of this. So they want the jury to say, well, like some people were saying in the chat, if you say no one time, that's enough to say extractive. My issue with that also is if there are limitations on some of this stuff, would you have to know when that no was? But anyway, I'm just going to read. Due to the particular facts of this case, the government believes that it is imperative to court informed the jury that prior consensual X activity is not determinative of whether a victim was X trafficked. As this court is well aware, the facts of this case involve instances of trafficking of Jane and Ventura that follow instances of consensual sexual activity. So they had to concede that. A topic that is likely to be addressed extensively by both parties during closing arguments. And it is Second Circuit law that the earlier period of consensual activity do not preclude a finding of trafficking to later activity involving a victim. So now we gotta pick and choose for when was the timing of this and that, and when was really consensual. And with Cassie, the issue is a lot of the stuff she didn't directly tell him; she just told other people allegedly. So they bring up United States v. Rainier, okay? Remember, I told y'all, and this is what can happen when you're a lawyer. Rainier is the case that Diddy's attorney was on. I think that's the case with Agnifilo that I told you he got 100 and something.
Hey,
They're
team.
using that when he basically appealed, it looks like, as their authority, which recognizing the ex-trafficking encompasses acts that compel a person to perform or to continue performing commercial sexual activity. That's their authority for that. I will have to read the whole case because I'm not seeing that quote accurately. The fact, and then they have another one, U.S. v. Markey, which is in the Second Circuit 2010 case. The fact that Jodie's enslavement arose from her initial participation in consensual BDSM activities does not require a contrary conclusion. Yeah, I will have to read the case. The same is true for forced labor. The government's forced labor theory focuses on 4 victims, Cassie and Jane, with regard to their participation in freak-off or hotel nights. And Mia and Capricorn with regard to their employment for the defendants. Similarly to ex-trafficking, Cassie and Jane's prior consensual sexual activity do not preclude a finding that later non-consensual sexual acts are forced labor. U.S. v. Gone, which stands for the proposition of victims' initial willingness to perform certain labor does not preclude the possibility that the victim's continued labor may become forced. It doesn't preclude the possibility. Nor does the fact that Mia and Capricorn willingly took jobs with the defendant preclude the finding that both at some point were forced to work. They're really kind of using this, conceding to some of the points, but they're trying to find case law to say that even though they may have done it willingly, consensually, asked for a job again, that don't mean that at some point it wasn't forced labor. That's basically what they're saying. To avoid any confusion on these points and to ensure that the jury applies the correct law. Next to this case, the governor respectfully requests the court include such an instruction. So ultimately, they're going to argue it today, I think at 2 o'clock, and we'll see what the court says. This is the requested instruction, payment not determinative. So they're requesting that payment also is not determinative, because that's another thing people were arguing, like, well, where's the money? How is he making money? And so if it's commercial and there's no money, then what are we really doing here? So they requested a jury
I'll be right
instruction.
back,
The government
y'all.
respectfully requested the court instruct the jury that ex-trafficking and labor and payment to the victim for the conduct are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, good. Microphone's
For
still on.
ex-trafficking, this instruction is crucial because the fact pattern underlying Jane's trafficking by the defendant. As Jane testified around 8. Got serious right now. Decided to start blowing stuff in his backyard. I think he's leaving for now. Okay, for ex-trafficking, this instruction is crucial because of the fact pattern underlying Jane's trafficking by the defendant. As James testified around April 2023, the defendant and James entered into a multi-year love contract under which the defendant agreed to pay James rent in the amount of $10,000 each month. While that contract was in effect and in part as a result of terms of that contract, The government alleges that Jane was trafficked. Because jurors may be under the mistaken impression that someone cannot be coerced if they receive compensation in return, the government requests that the jury be instructed as to the law that payment alone does not preclude a finding of guilt as to extravagance. And that's U.S. v. Riviera, which affirming conviction despite victim statements that the defendant paid them and they earned more money than they would have. Why would anybody argue because I paid them? They weren't extracted. Why would that even be? That's not good. Anyway, because the forced labor victims also receive money or gifts from the defendant, it is important to instruct the jury that payment does not preclude the finding of forced labor in order to prevent confusion. Because from what I heard in the transcript, or what I saw in the transcript, and what I've heard online, with Jane, okay, the first couple of years he wasn't paying her on a regular basis. She requested almost an allowance to be paid on a regular basis. And one of his
Okay, I'm back.
I'm not getting this part, but at one point, the defendant paid Jane and $10,000 per month rent and similarly paid for Cassie's rent and other expenses. In addition, as employees, Leah and Capricorn were paid salaries by the defendant's company. The jury may not intuitively understand that this payment does not preclude a guilty finding on forced labor. Requested instruction 3, cumulative conduct. The government's proposed additional charge language instructs the defendant that they may consider a defendant's cumulative conduct is particularly necessary in this case, for the jury to understand what it can consider in assessing whether Ms. Ventura was coerced. Throughout trial, the government has introduced evidence not only of threats and harms directed at Ms. Ventura over a multi-year period by the defendant, but also the defendant's threats and abuse of others of which Ms. Ventura was aware. Under the law, the jury may consider all this conduct in assessing whether a victim was coerced. That's U.S. v. Purcell, and that's the Second Circuit 2020 case. Viewing defendant, which stands for the proposition, viewing defendant's cumulative conduct and holding that the government had met its burden of proving coercion. When evaluating if a defendant exerted coercive force over a complainant, juries are thus directed to evaluate the totality of the defendant's conduct toward a trafficking victim, including any threats of specific instances of past violence that may have created a culture of fear which that the victim's conduct was rendered involuntary. However, without such an instruction, jurors may mistakenly believe that they are confined to considering a narrower category of evidence in deciding whether the evidence of sex trafficking are met. The cumulative conduct and forced labor instruction is also important for being capital. Both work for the defendant over long periods of time, and during their employment, the defendant was violent and threatened them. The cumulative effects of the violence and threats can all be considered by the jury. Forced to engage in labor or servitude for the defendant. Without an instruction of this nature, jurors may feel they are constrained to consider only whether a particular act of violence or threat results in enforced labor. Physical restraint, that's the requested instruction. 4, based on the cross-examination of Jane and Leah, the government respectfully requests the court briefly instruct the jury that physical restraint is not required to establish sex trafficking and forced labor. As this court is aware, one of the key instances of trafficking of Jane that the government intends to discuss at length in its closing, and which the government anticipates that the defense will also address in closing involves the defendant's assault of and subsequent freak-off involving Jane in June 2024. But didn't you hear them say? During cross-examination about this incident, defense counsel extensively questioned Jane about times that she could have escaped on that date.
Talk about it.
Asking, like in the transcript, they quote the transcript, does the back gate have a capability for you to leave the house? Asking whether she has other members in Los Angeles. Moreover, during today's Rule 29 motion, defense counsel again argued that Jane could not have been trafficked on the stage because she could have left. Because of the defense's lengthy cross-examination on this point and expected arguments at closing, and to avoid confusion, the government requests that a very brief instruction be added on this point that makes clear the legal import of this evidence. Similarly, during the cross of Mia and in the Rule 29 argument today, the defense repeatedly argued that Mia could have left her job at any time and is therefore not a forced labor victim. That is incorrect under the law. They decided Riviera with affirming forced labor and extra-fee convictions even though victim once left the defendant for later resign. And the instructions is needed to correct any misimpression of the jurors' mind that Mia had an affirmative belief. The next requested instruction has to do with the extra-fee. Defendant need not receive things of value. So that was what some of you all were saying, like, well, he didn't make no money. And so they're saying, you ain't got to make no money. The government respectfully requests the court add a single sentence to the charge on extra-fee to clarify the defendant need not be the person who receives the thing of value under the extra-fee. The government believes that this short instruction is necessary here due to the particular relationship between the parties and the potential that jurors will be influenced by the preconceived misconceptions about trafficking that do not comport with the law as it will be explained to them. And under Noble v. Weinstein, they note that Congress noted that trafficking in persons is not limited to the XH. That's the quote that's cited. A short instruction on this point is needed to clarify the proper scope of this statute. Commercial X acts need not occur. Told y'all if you listen to what you guys been saying in these comments, and honestly the comments, I told you all when I started this channel, I said you guys are the best. Test study. What you guys think, I would be looking at what you guys think to see how I can tweak this, because that means other jurors might think that way. Thank you, Queen Brielle, for the future and the subscribe to share. It's over 1,000 of y'all in here. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel.
I'm getting
Thank
ready
you so much,
to end this in the next couple of
I
minutes.
appreciate you, sir. I'm going to talk about your brother later, but you know, we ain't going to be there right now. We're about to get back up here. Andre Styles said they definitely have included forced labor. Andre. See through you said, okay, that was, I don't want to, so when y'all having your conversation, because I get one part and get confused. Ray said forced labor in any situation where someone is compelled to work against their will through harmful means, including physical harm, threats, deception, or restriction of movement. That's what Ray Bishop, that is the co-counsel of the platform. TLC Necessary said ex-trafficking is a billion-dollar industry being endorsed by the government instead of the tax dollars in this mess. We deserve a refund.
Yeah, the hell we do.
They've been waiting on reparations for decades. Shantae said Jane lives across the country and her FOs were like once a month. Jane is I think Jane is difficult for a lot of people. Partially because she initiated some of it. She set it up for Valentine's Day, I think. She also used it and tried to say she only did this one time. I don't believe she only did it one time. And
Hell
I said
no.
it before the text came out. She probably knew Diddy wasn't into her like that and wasn't looking at her as being a for real, like in public, like a Miami.
And I won't give this up about Daphne Joy. Daphne Joy was used as a tool to get back at 50 Cent. Nothing more, nothing less. Daphne Joy for Diddy was a tool to get back at 50 Cent. That is it. That is all.
I do believe Miami triggered something, and I think she's one of them. And so she wanted that where people knew that they were together. Even if it was just a dating situation, because Diddy, when he came to Miami, he said, I'm just dating, I'm single. He never said, like, she said, we go together real bad. But he didn't say, he's like, oh, okay, straight so, but yeah, I'm single. She wanted that. And so when she seen him out, she must have known and perhaps Miami may, I'm not saying whether she did or did not all this stuff. She said she did, so I'm going to go with what she said. Whoever she would go out to these places with, they may not have been doing these free golf or these hotel nights. So she used it at that point. If you don't get that, you ain't negative. Getting the free golf again. So she actually used that as a way to almost stay in his orbit. I'm not saying he didn't care about her at all, but I'm saying he was probably willing to stick it out just a little bit longer because of
Pretty
his
much.
appetite that cash. So with Jane, I think it's a difficult situation with Jane. With Cassie, we know, of course, she started out, she was a bit younger. Jane was about 10 years older than what Cassie was when she started. 10, Diddy, and also with Cassie, he wasn't abusive to Jane. That whole violent situation they had was Jane started it and apparently Diddy finished it.
Yep.
But she knew from the lawsuit that he had done this with Cassie. And allegedly, according to her, he said Cassie was like, he said that Cassie was violent to her. That's what she testified to, Jane. So even with the Cassie situation, it was domestic violence. Like a lot of that was abuse. But what the government is trying to paint, and they want the jury to believe, is that no, she stayed around and she involved herself in a lot of this stuff in the trafficking or these freak offs because he was violent and he was threatening her and people around her. So just generally because he's a violent person, because he was violent, he had a deep relationship with her that was very toxic, that you can almost, we want you to assume, I guess, that she wanted to leave, but she didn't want to participate, but she chose to because she was scared of him type situation. So that's like the violent threat. So they're trying to add little liners and they're fishing for cases in order to support their theory. So that they can try to debunk the defense's argument. So you already know they're about to fight tooth and nail. Tooth and nail. In order to avoid this type of additional instructions to be added to those instructions. This is what you're fighting. They're going to try to, they being the defense, are going to try to find the best instructions that they can get, that they think will benefit them, and the government's going to do the same thing. LL, thank you for the super chat. Came in late, so Cam, what does that mean for us? I don't know. I have to know what you're talking about. I've talked about a whole lot of stuff. Lisa Mooney said, however, he did threaten to tell her to show a tape to her baby dad after extortion. That's her testimony, right? Or was that in the text message? Was that her testimony, Lisa? Or was that her? Was that in the text message? I don't remember, so I don't want to talk, and I have no clue what I'm speaking. Mo said even though she said on the stand she did it because she didn't want anyone else to do it. Right. That's pretty much what Cassie said, and I'm sure line by line, quote by quote, that's what the defense is going to remind you. That's her words, but no proof was presented. That's what Caesar is like talking about. Are you talking about the Jane situation, about the baby daddy? Because what you're saying is, let's just assume, for argument's sake, because I don't remember if it was a text message or Jane just said that. Jane was caught up in a lot of inconsistencies.
Okay, I got it.
So what you're saying is the jury has to believe Jane's testimony. They can throw Jane's whole testimony out and be like, I don't believe nothing like that. That's what they could do. So if that happens, then what? They have to believe that that happened. When the Cassie, and the reason why it may be a little iffy is because when the Cassie situation occurred, and she said about the $20,000, we since then saw text messages of which it appeared Diddy was asking for some money back at some point, I guess, because he found out that she had to sleep with the trainer that he was paying for. So he said, should I send the invoice to you, to your man, your mama? And he was like really going off saying she She paid, I guess, he paid $50,000 to the trainer. He paid for her, paid for Terry. Basically, in the text said, both of y'all finessed me out of my money, and he was sleeping with the trainer the whole time. She was denying it. She denied that she was sleeping with him, but we all know the fact. She ended up marrying him, having kids. But
Sorry, I got cut off right here. Please like, share, subscribe. See y'all later.